In recent years, the world has seen the rise of new forms of doing and getting work, with the emergence of digital labor platforms where service transactions are facilitated via platforms or apps. However, numerous studies have documented that platform workers are at risk because of a lack of employment laws that would protect them from unfair labor practices, such as receiving basic decent work protections and benefits. As part of a global effort in better understanding the conditions of digital platform workers, a group of researchers looked into the working conditions of Filipino workers in the country's growing gig economy. The project is funded and conducted in partnership with the Fairwork Global Network, which developed the Fairwork principles in consultation with the International Labour Organization, workers' associations, and research institutions.
I am Cheryl Soriano and I'm a professor in the Department of Communication of De La Salle University in Manila. So, Fairwork is a global network of researchers and activists that seek to advance fair and decent labor conditions in the platform economy globally. The Fairwork Global Network approached us, knowing our experience in research in this field, and then invited us to participate in more systematic research to be able to understand now the experience of workers in geographically tethered platform work. By this, I mean the kind of platform labor that involves workers and customers that are co-located in the same city or location or area. This includes riders in food, courier, and service delivery.
Guided by Fairwork's 5 pillars of fair work standards for the gig economy, which are fair pay,
that is understanding that all workers, regardless of the nature of their employment, must deserve decent wages or earnings from their work.
Fair conditions,
which implies that workers are protected from task-specific risks.
Fair contracts.
Platforms must have clear-cut contracts that are transparent and well communicated to the workers, free from unfair conditions, and must also be cascaded to workers in a language that they will be able to understand and comprehend.
Fair management.
By fair management, we mean that workers must have access to due process in the assessment of their performance of work, having access to mechanisms for redress.
And fair representation.
By this, we mean that workers should be respected in platforms in terms of having a voice, and at the same time, they should be able to freely organize as well.
The research project examined in a comparative perspective the working conditions of 9 platforms operating in the Philippines that included ride-hailing, food and delivery, and logistics.
Rider mo kagawa! Huwag gawin kawawa! Huwag gawin kawawa!
Yung mga platform po natin na iba't iba is nagpapababa ng mga delivery fare.
So ang aming hiling lang naman yung wag na kami pagkakakitaan, kami mga rider. Since kami ay part din ng company, in fact, ang tawag nga sa amin delivery partner. So, kung kami kino-consider na partner, wag na kami pagkakitaan. Bigay kung ano yung dapat na para sa amin.
I was a food delivery rider in the UK. I would cycle 50 to 70 miles a day, every day, 6 days a week, delivering food, which takes its toll on your body, right? Like the air in London, just like the air in Manila, isn't really good for you, you know, it's quite toxic. My name's Adam Badger. I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Oxford, working on the Fairwork project. And what we're trying to do really is take note of where good and poor practices in the platform economy and trying to push for change. So we're trying to create improvements wherever we can, and we're trying to make sure that workers are given a fair deal and fair treatment. What we do is to try and collect evidence from the platforms themselves. We collect evidence from workers, and we also conduct desk research. And we try and triangulate a score from all 3 of these positions. And what that means in practice is taking a look at the policies that might exist, how they play out in the workplace, and the dialogues that we have with various stakeholders to try and really assess where the working conditions, the lived experience of the work, falls in relation to the principles themselves. It's not only about policies, and it's not only about experience, but it's about where these two things intersect.
Beyond understanding the current situation, the Fairwork Philippines research also aims to exert pressure upon platforms to enact pro-worker policy changes and offers pathways for effective regulation.
A narrative we often hear is that these systems are based on data and these systems are based on algorithms that make decisions. And it's almost that computational element of the platform is made to make it seem like it's natural, right? That there's no bias or that there's no intentionality behind these decisions. What's important to say is that they're always active decisions that are made through the design process of a platform. Those algorithms are designed by people. And the imperatives are hardwired into them by people. And if we can try and make this fair by design, then we might be able to, push towards a much fairer platform economy.
We understand that platforms are businesses that aim to be able to sustain themselves. At the same time, however, we have seen examples of social enterprises that are able to be sustainable while at the same time committing to advancing decent and fair conditions for the workers that are the backbone, the very backbone of their operations. I think maintaining this balance between sustainability and at the same time protecting the condition of the workers that are at the heart of a company's operation should be our aim for sustainability of organizations in the future, more broadly.
A warm welcome to everyone who is joining us today. Good afternoon po sa ating lahat. My name is Chana Garcia of the Fairwork Philippines team. Thank you for attending the Fairwork Philippines 2023 report launch. We are fortunate to have a varied audience for this event and we look forward to your insights. We first want to acknowledge our audience. Right now, we have a total of 41 attendees who come in different industries such as media, digital platforms, universities, government agencies, and the private sector in different parts of the Philippines from Manila, Dumaguete, Bacolod, Cavite, La Union, and Iligan. Siyempre, hindi natin makakalimutan ang ating mga gig workers na nanonood ngayon sa ating webinar at sa Facebook. Welcome po sa ating launch. Today, we are launching the 2023 Fairwork Scores for the Philippines. This is the second round of ratings done by the Fairwork team. The Fairwork project is an action research project that sheds light on the working conditions in the gig economy. Anchored on the Fairwork principles, we evaluate platforms in the ride-hailing and delivery sectors against measures of fairness with the hope to shape a fairer future of work for all. Fairwork Philippines, hosted by De La Salle University's Social Development Research Center, is part of a global network of researchers seeking to advance fair and decent labor conditions for gig workers globally. It is led by the Oxford Internet Institute, University of Oxford. Fairwork is now being implemented in over 30 countries. To welcome us to this launch, let us call on Tobias Cutler, Research Associate in the Fairwork Secretariat based at the WZB Berlin Social Science Center.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today. My name is Tobias Kuttler. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Fairwork project, and I'm based in Berlin, Germany. Fairwork is an international research project based at the University of Oxford in the UK and at the WZB Berlin Social Science Center in Germany, as well as at many research institutes and universities around the world. Today is an exciting day because we are here today to present the results of the second round of Fairwork ratings for the Philippines. In the second year, the Philippines team evaluated 10 platforms providing 4- and 2-wheel ride-hailing, food delivery, courier and logistics services against the 5 principles of Fairwork and gave them a score out of 10 based on the quality of work that they provide. The research of year 1 was characterized by the lockdowns as a consequence of the pandemic, the mobility restrictions and the social distancing policies. And the new report focuses on platform labor conditions in the context of the reopening after this intense phase, reopening of the Philippines economy, where the travel and business and everyday activity resumed to normalcy. So this year, 2 more platforms were added to the list of platforms that have been researched. They are Joyride Car and Maxim, while the platform Transportify was not rated this year. So I'll briefly talk about the background of the Fairwork project before the Philippines team will present the research that was done in the Philippines over the last year. So I will share my screen. So what does Fairwork do? Fairwork works around the world to collaborate closely with workers, platforms, advocates, and policymakers to envision and build a fairer future of work. Through a global network of researchers based in 39 countries that you see here on the map, across 5 continents, Fairwork evaluates digital platforms' working conditions and ranks them based on 5 principles of fair work. The Fairwork project focuses on how work is experienced in the platform economy. By platform economy, I mean the sector of work that is created by digital labor platforms like Grab or Foodpanda that deliver their services locally. As you will see again this year, most of the platforms that have been researched in the Philippines aren't able to evidence that they have minimum standards of fair work in place. Indeed, 3 platforms got lower this year in comparison to last year. However, some platforms are scoring better than others. That means that better practice is actually possible and platforms have the ability to improve their practices. Rather than simply highlighting these shortfalls, the goal of Fairwork is to work with platforms and provide resources to help them institutionalize better standards. So how do we work? Let me tell you a bit more about the principles that we use to evaluate the platforms. The principles are structured around 5 key themes: fair pay, fair conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation. The first principle focuses on fair pay. Platform workers in the Philippines and in most other places are classified as self-employed. That is, they are not employees of the platform companies. That means that platforms are able to pay their workers below the minimum wage. So many platform workers in the Philippines don't earn enough to make a decent living. We believe that workers, irrespective of any classification, should earn a living wage after costs. We assess earnings according to the mandated minimum wage in the home jurisdiction as well as the current living wage. The second principle focuses on working conditions. A lot of platform work is inherently risky, and if something goes wrong, you just can't work. On many platforms, this means that you don't get any income. So therefore, platforms should have policies in place to protect workers from work-related risks and should take proactive measures to protect and promote the health and safety of workers. The terms and conditions governing platform work are not always clear and accessible to workers, and therefore Principle 3 focuses on terms and conditions and on fair contracts, and requires platforms to make their contracts and terms and conditions accessible to workers, readable and comprehensible. Contracts should be in a language that workers understand, so in a local language, and they should be accessible at any time. Workers should also be aware of and hopefully also involved in changes that are made to their contracts. Regardless of the worker's employment status, the contract should be free of clauses which unreasonably exclude liability on the part of the service user or the platform. Principle 4 is on fair management. Often there is no due process when it comes to disciplinary or dismissal procedures. The accounts of workers who depend on a platform can be deactivated, and this often happens without a fair process. Therefore, there should be a documented process through which workers can be heard, can appeal decisions affecting them, and should be informed of the reasons for those decisions. There must be a clear channel of communication to workers involving the ability to appeal management decisions or deactivation. The use of algorithms must also be transparent and result in equitable outcomes for workers. There should be an identifiable and documented policy that ensures equity in the way workers are managed on a platform. For example, in the hiring process or when workers are disciplined or even fired. Finally, Principle 5 is on fair representation. Most platform workers don't have a collective or associational power that is common in other economic sectors. So workers are in a structurally weak bargaining position, which allows platforms to unilaterally determine wages and working conditions. Therefore, platforms should provide a documented process through which worker voice can be expressed. Irrespective of their employment classifications, workers should have the right to organize in collective bodies, and platforms should be prepared to cooperate and negotiate with them. So how does our scoring system work? The Fairwork principles form the basis for how we score the platforms. Each Fairwork principle is broken down into 2 points. The second point can only be awarded if the first point has been fulfilled. And every platform receives a score out of 10. And platforms are only given a point when they can satisfactorily demonstrate the implementation of these principles. Failing to achieve a point does not necessarily mean that a platform does not comply with the principle in question. This is quite important to highlight the difference here. It simply means that we are unable to evidence the compliance. So sometimes platforms cannot provide evidence and data that they're actually complying with the principles. So let me end with mentioning a couple of important aspects that a new report from the Philippines is highlighting. First, I would like to mention the aspect of the new normalcy of extremely long work hours on platforms. This does not only include active work hours of, for example, driving or delivering, but also waiting times. These long work hours are needed to gain even a minimum income to make a living. It's a trend that we see in many parts of the world, not only in the Philippines. This trend is associated with quite a worrisome consequence. First, it is associated with a growing vulnerability of workers to risks that are associated with long working hours, which includes the general health risks and the stress for workers, but also the risk of fatigue-related accidents. But the trend towards long working hours is also an effect of another deeply worrisome development, that workers become financially indebted to platforms. Workers can become chained to financial commitments towards platforms, either while gaining access to the platform work, so before starting platform work, or by shouldering the costs of production that platforms impose. And then Dr. Soriano will talk about that more about the Philippines in a minute. But that workers become indebted to platforms is not only confined to the Philippines alone. A similar situation we have encountered in other Asian countries as well, and this was already highlighted in the first Fairwork report for Bangladesh last year. Second is to mention the health and safety risks of platform work. This is reflected in the disturbing accounts of accidents and cases of worker deaths related to platform work, especially delivery work. This was, for example, recently highlighted in the new Fairwork Brazil report, where worker accidents have really reached a very, very difficult and disturbing level. But it is an additional aspect that the new Fairwork Philippines report is also mentioning, the growing health impacts on workers due to severe weather conditions, especially working under severe heat waves and conditions of heavy rain. These conditions are common in many regions of the world, definitely, but they are increasing in number and intensity as a result of climate change, and are more and more also felt in parts of the world that so far have benefited from more moderate climates, such as regions of Europe. Policies of platforms are often not yet prepared, not very well prepared to mitigate these kinds of risks of working under these difficult weather conditions. So this is definitely an aspect that will become more and more important also in the coming years. And the Fairwork Philippines report is already highlighting this very strongly. So yeah, the Fairwork Philippines report is really doing an amazing job in highlighting in detail the growing precariousness of work that is and the growing precariousness of workers associated with the financial instability that I just mentioned, and with the impact of these health and safety risks. And I can only congratulate the team Philippines for their really fabulous work in the last year, and for a really very dense and concise report that deserves to reach a wide audience in the Philippines and beyond, and thereby hopefully will make really a positive contribution in improving the lives of platform workers. Thank you very much, Professor Soriano and your team, for your really tireless and amazing work in bringing all the stakeholders in the Philippines together for the benefit of platform workers. This has really been a very intense process, and you have done such an amazing job in bringing really all the stakeholders, politicians, worker representations, civil society together to make this possible. So now I'll give the floor to the Fairwork Philippines team, and they will talk more about the research of the last year and about the report. And yeah, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy this Fairwork report launch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for your presentation. We are here today to present the research that we have done in the Philippines over the last year. The Fairwork Philippines 2023 report will be presented by its report authors, Dr. Cheryl Ruth Soriano, Dr. Virgil Binghay, Attorney J.V. Gamboa, and Marge Medina. Dr. Soriano is the principal investigator for Fairwork Philippines and a professor at De La Salle University, Manila. Dr. Virgil Binghay is a co-investigator for Fairwork Philippines. He is a professor and director of the Center for Industry Productivity and Competitiveness at the University of the Philippines School of Labor and Industrial Relations, or UP Soler. Attorney J.V. Gamboa is the legal consultant for Fairwork Philippines. He is also a policy and legal research associate at the Manila Observatory. And lastly, we have Ms. Marge Medina, our project manager for Fairwork Philippines. We are also honored to be joined by two panelists who will discuss and contextualize the report's findings. I am delighted to introduce Mr. Don Pangan, ang Secretary General of Kapatiran sa Dalawang Gulong or Kagulong, at si Mr. Geoffrey Labudahon, ang National Coordinator ng Sentro ng mga Nagkakaisa at Progresibong Manggagawa or Rider Sentro. Welcome po sa ating report launch. Before we officially start our presentation, please be reminded of the following. First, as mentioned at the start of our event, this event is being recorded. For our audience, please observe webinar etiquette. The recordings will be available after the event, and you can visit the DLSU SDRC FB page for the copy of the live stream. Second, we request that everyone's opinions and perspectives are respected in this space. Later po, meron po tayong Q&A session where your questions will be answered at the end of the session and by our panelists and our report authors as well as Tobias. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature or the Facebook Live comments to send in your questions. Questions may be sent in while the event is ongoing. These will be answered again later during our Q&A. To officially start the Fairwork report presentation, let's hear it from the Fairwork Philippines team.
Good day, everyone. The second Fairwork report for the Philippines examines the working conditions of Filipino platform workers in the new normal. Last year, our fieldwork research report was situated in the middle of intermittent lockdowns, mobility restrictions, and social distancing policies. This year, our report assessed platform labor conditions in the context of the reopening of the Philippine economy, where travel, business, and everyday activity resumed to normalcy. Our research last year estimated close to 500,000 platform workers in the country, and we estimate that this continues to grow as labor platforms are also expanding in terms of services and reach across the country. This year, we assessed 10 of the country's largest labor platforms offering ride-hailing and food and courier delivery against the 5 Fairwork principles discussed by Tobias earlier, giving each a fairness score out of 10. I will first talk about the methods that we used for the research. And the Fairwork project uses 3 approaches to effectively measure fairness at work. We begin with desk research. Then this process starts with mapping platforms that are operating in each city, including noting the largest and most influential ones that are operating across the archipelago. And this allowed us, for example, to identify Maxim as a result of talking to workers last year, being apparently one of the most popular platforms operating outside of Metro Manila that's employing a lot of workers. Also, desk research involves legal assistance to review contracts and policies that are available on websites and also in other official pages of platforms. The next approach is conducting platform interviews. It means we interview platform managers and we also request for evidence from them in terms of how they attend to the Fairwork principles or implement policies to be able to attend to these Fairwork principles. The last is worker interviews. We interviewed 6 to 10 workers for each platform, and each interview lasted for 45 minutes to about an hour and 30 minutes. These interviews do not aim to build a representative sample, but they aim to do a deep dive of understanding the actual conditions of the workers that helps us understand the actualization of policies and the ways workers experience those platform-related policies. It allows us also to understand the processes of work and the ways work processes are carried out and managed. So final scores are collectively decided by the Fairwork team based on all 3 forms of evidence. The scores are reviewed by the country team, us, the Philippine team, also with the assistance of the team at the University of Oxford, and also 2 reviewers from the other Fairwork country teams. This provides consistency and rigor to the scoring process. When we have already generated the partial scores, we wrote to platforms a request for additional policies and evidence, and to clarify some of the policies. Points are only awarded if clear evidence exists for each threshold. Now, we're at the point of showing the platform scores. Our hope is that the scores that we will present today spotlights where platforms are stepping up and offering decent and fair working conditions for their workers. The scores that we will reveal will show us that low pay, exploitation, and dangerous working conditions aren't just accidents. They are choices made by governments, platforms, and even the users. The league table presented here represents the scores for the 10 platforms that we evaluated for this year. These are Angkas, Borzo, GrabCar, Grab Food and Express, Food Panda, Joyride Car, Lalamove, Maxim, and TokTok. As you can see, the table represents a generally low performance with some variation in how well platforms perform. I begin with fair pay. Our study could not find evidence that any platform studied ensured that workers earned at least the daily minimum wage of $610 or $11.22 after work-related costs, or that they provided payment on time and in full. When assessing platforms under this condition, we considered the amount earned by the worker from performing gigs or work, as well as work-related costs such as gas or fuel, mobile load, or vehicle maintenance and amortization, including, of course, the time that they spend waiting between jobs. Although some workers who work for long hours in a day are seem to be able to meet the minimum wage threshold at a gross income level, many fall below it when the cost of task-specific equipment they need for performing the tasks and other work-related costs get to be factored in. We also could not find evidence that platforms ensure workers earn at least the local living wage, which we assessed at 1,000 pesos. It is for this very reason that we emphasize in the report the phenomenon of platform-related debt, which refers to a situation when a gig worker's work-related costs exceed their earnings. Platform-related indebtedness pertains to three interrelated conditions closely tied to the nature of work in the gig economy. Una, workers become indebted in the aspirational process of gaining access to platform work, meaning umuutang ang mga manggagawa sa mga operator, money lender, vehicle sellers sa paghahangad na maibabalik nila sa pamamagitan ng gig work ang kanilang quote-unquote puhunan. Pangalawa, ang workers ay nakaka-experience ng insecurity as they assume the costs of production na dapat ina-assume ng mga platforms. Ito ay kinoconsider namin na utang ng mga platforms sa mga manggagawa. At pangatlo, workers become further chained to platform labor as a result of indebtedness. Ibig sabihin nito, workers become indebted to platforms for their survival. Ito ang nakikita naming kinalalabasan ng sitwasyon ng platform-related debt. So now we go to fair conditions. One platform, GrabCar, could evidence practices to protect workers from risks associated with their jobs. Some examples of these good practices include providing adequate free safety training and emergency buttons embedded in the app that help protect workers from risks, including that of lone working or ang pagtatrabaho mag-isa. For two-wheel ride-hailing or delivery work, we looked at whether platforms provided protective equipment at no cost to workers. Unfortunately, we could not find sufficient evidence that any platform providing two-wheel service met this condition. For the second point, we looked for evidence of free accident insurance and other safety nets. Although some platforms provided benefits beyond direct task-specific risks, such as educational or calamity assistance, or even gas or grocery discounts, we could not evidence that any of the platforms we studied provide income security to workers in the case of sickness or sudden inability to work. Some platforms facilitate the provision of accident insurance, but the costs are actually paid or shouldered by the workers. No platform received the second point for fair conditions. On fair contracts, of the 10 platforms we studied, we found evidence that GrabCar, Grab Express, Lalamove, and Angkas provide clear and accessible terms and conditions, and also data privacy policies that were communicated to workers in a language that they could understand. We lacked evidence that the rest of the platforms explain their contracts to workers in a language that could be fully understood and that they announced changes to the work arrangements that can affect pay or working conditions within a reasonable time frame prior to implementation. No platform received the second point for fair contracts. Our evidence shows that most contracts excluded liability on the part of the platforms. Now, on fair management, two platforms, GrabCar and GrabExpress, were evidenced to have communication mechanisms for workers to meaningfully appeal low ratings, payment issues, deactivations, and other kinds of penalties and disciplinary actions. And these provide workers greater recourse opportunities. We could not find evidence to award this point to other platforms. None of the 10 platforms were awarded the second point for fair management. While some have anti-discrimination policies, we could not find sufficient evidence for any of the platforms to be having proactive policies that are inclusive of disadvantaged groups or clarity on how algorithms are used to determine fair work and also remuneration. Now I'm on to the last principle, which is fair representation. Being able to freely organize under a recognized collective body is a fundamental right for workers in most countries. In the Philippine platform economy, there is still much that could be done to improve conditions in this regard, both in terms of the organization of workers and the recognition of worker-led organizations too. We could not find any evidence that the platforms we studied this year assured freedom of association and the expression of collective worker voice. We also could not prove that the platforms we studied supported democratic governance. Government and market forces continually promote platform labor as a viable opportunity despite lacking labor regulations. Amid the continually growing number of Filipinos and their families that are dependent on the gig economy, our findings point to the importance of thinking about the platform economy not just a temporary or an exceptional labor condition, but rather as a long-term feature of work. I now turn you over to Professor Dongbing Hai to talk about the more specific details about how workers experience or not safety and security in the platform economy.
This year's report situates our ratings and analysis within the ambivalent nature of labor platforms for Filipino workers. On one hand, it gives displaced workers no better options for everyday sustenance from hunger or an opportunity to secure their family's needs in the context of poor employment alternatives. On the other hand, we surface critical issues of platform-related debt, a lack of safety nets, and long-term financial insecurity. We also emphasize the multiple occupational health and safety risks Filipino gig workers face daily on the road, along with shortcomings in terms of basic safety protections from accidents, illnesses, and deaths. This led us to the theme of this report, worker health, safety, and security. As Dr. Soriano has shown in our ratings, given the compounded costs, workers can end up with a negative value after the computation of earnings and costs, meaning that their spending on operating costs is higher than earnings. This compels workers to stretch the hours and workdays, taking up those previously allocated for rest. Workers can become chained to financial commitments and squeezed by seemingly predatory practices of downstream industries meant to support platform services by facilitating access, but end up consigning workers to long hours of platform work. Workers are also vulnerable to scams and end up shouldering the costs and consequences. The issue of Noel Escote's death in November 2022 raised questions about platforms' responsibility beyond workplace obligations surrounding health and death. It also heightened debates about the reckoning of active working hours in gig economy and the securities workers are entitled to. Tragically, deaths on the road are not uncommon in the gig economy globally. Knowing recent reports of gig workers' deaths, our team discovered this year that close to all workers we interviewed have had accidents of different forms and levels of severity. Workers narrated their daily risk experiences and shared how common accidents are among the peers in this economy. We featured these stories in our written report. A concerning aspect is how, for workers who experience accidents, very few could access protection from the platform they work for. Thus, workers shoulder the medical costs themselves, or worse, wait for the wounds or broken limbs to heal at home without professional medical treatment. This is even though platforms proclaim the presence of accident insurance on the respective company websites. Workers have also expressed ambiguities in accessing the supposedly available insurance or complained about the tedious claims processes. Workers reporting accidents may be deactivated while investigations ensue. They often absorb the medical or vehicle repair costs themselves. Workers may also suffer from the threat of deactivation when they raise concerns or organize as collectives. Given the limited support provided by the platforms and the government, workers crowdsource aid from other workers or actively share strategies for coping in social media groups. While this represents an articulation of worker solidarity, the responsibility of care appears to have been relegated to workers. The high level of dependency and sometimes desperation of Filipino workers in embracing gig work should not mean that platforms can neglect the responsibility for providing ample protection and safety nets. This brings us to emphasizing the role of platforms for promoting robust occupational health and safety measures. The safety and well-being of hail riding and delivery workers are paramount given the multiple risks they face on the road. To ensure the protection of these workers, it is imperative to establish and implement robust occupational health and safety measures. This includes adequate training on defensive driving techniques, equipping workers with free safety gear, conducting regular vehicle maintenance checks, and enforcing rest periods to combat fatigue. Additionally, platforms should collaborate with local authorities to address road infrastructure issues and improve road safety. Workers need to be financially secure, should not necessarily drive them to greater health risks, but the platform economy can produce conditions conducive to this. Gig workers stretch their working hours to secure more gigs to earn what they need to remain afloat amid fluctuating rates, opaque pay structures, rigid ratings, and increasing competition. Workers are compelled to do this not only as a free choice, but also due to unfair or predatory pay and incentive structures. The lack of measures to protect workers' safety heightens their vulnerability, and the absence of safety nets implies that any sudden inability to work results in livelihood insecurity. Setting worker consultations on working hours and encouraging workers to have sufficient rest periods is crucial to prevent fatigue-related accidents. Long and exhausting shifts can impair concentrations and increase the livelihood of accidents, and often workers was engaged in this due to unfair pricing. This also connects to the broader issue of reckoning active hours in the platform economy, where workers are unpaid for wait times that can stretch for long hours in aggregate. Also factoring in the compounded costs they must shoulder. All these compel them to extend their total hours on the road. One effective measure to mitigate some of the accident risks involved is for platform companies to offer all workers free group life and accident insurance coverage. Providing insurance coverage serves as safety net for riders, offering financial protection in the event of accidents, injuries, or unfortunate events. This would demonstrate a commitment to the welfare of the workers, recognizing the inherent risk associated with their job. Although some platform companies offer insurance coverage to their workers, there are frequent limitations and gaps in the level of protection provided. One significant challenge is workers' lack of comprehensive understanding regarding insurance policies and their associated terms and conditions. This knowledge gap can lead to confusion and potential obstacles when workers claim insurance. As such, platform companies should make greater efforts to ensure that any insurance coverage in place is accessible to workers and that their ability to work is not limited while claims are being investigated or processed. To address this issue, platform companies should prioritize clear and transparent communication among insurance coverage. Workers must be informed about the extent of coverage, any exclusions or limitations, and the necessary steps to initiate a claim. And this can be integrated in worker training or learning sessions. Providing accessible resources such as online guides or informational sessions can guide workers with the information they need to navigate the insurance process effectively. Through transparently outlining these essential aspects, workers can comprehensively understand their entitlements and the safeguards in place. This helps dispel gossip and misunderstanding about the availability of insurance and helps workers inform decisions and confidently navigate the insurance landscape. Importantly, transparency fosters fairness, accountability, and an environment where workers are equipped with the knowledge to navigate their roles confidently. Aside from physical health, workers' mental health also suffers and must be attended to. Riders across gender fall victim to harassment by passengers who take advantage of the physical contact. Workers feel disrespected but may not complain about fear of receiving a low rating from the customer or having their account suspended during the investigation. Platforms must have welcoming and responsive mechanisms to encourage workers to report experiences of bullying and harassment without consequences to their accounts, ratings, tiers, or incentives. I now turn you over to Attorney JV Gamboa to discuss the specific policy recommendations.
Good afternoon. I'm Attorney J.V.R. Gamboa, legal consultant for Fairwork Philippines. With the Fairwork scores and key themes for this year's report already discussed by Dr. Soriano and Dr. Binghay, let us look at how our study can contribute to the domestic policy discourse on gig workers' labor rights and welfare. While this section is primarily directed toward policymakers such as Congress, the platforms themselves may also voluntarily, at their own discretion, adopt the following recommendations as internal policy to ensure that more protections are enjoyed by gig workers. I will first briefly discuss the policy landscape surrounding gig work. The Philippine Constitution categorically declares that the state shall afford full protection to labor. Further, the Constitution also guarantees an array of rights to all workers. However, the Labor Code of the Philippines currently places most, if not all, of worker protections conditional to the existence of employment relationships. This then becomes inconsistent with the platform's current practice of identifying gig workers as partners, third-party service providers, or independent contractors. Gig workers are excluded from the protections granted by the Labor Code, such as rest periods, holiday pay, compensation for work-related injury, and unionization and collective bargaining, among others. They are also excluded from minimum wage law. While Philippine labor law recognizes various tests to determine employment relationships, such as the fourfold test or control test and the economic dependence test, the protections under the Labor Code remain elusive for gig workers until the labor tribunals and courts definitively declare that gig workers are employees under the prevailing legal framework. As noted in the previous year's report, the Department of Labor Employment issued Labor Advisory 14 Series of 2021 on the working conditions of delivery riders in food delivery and courier activities. As observed, there's been no meaningful impact on the welfare of gig workers because the Labor Advisory merely clarifies the potential applicability of existing labor regulations to the gig economy. With this gap in gig worker protection, the Philippine Congress has taken efforts to start discussion of possible regulation. 4 Senate bills authored and filed separately by Senators Ejercito, Tolentino, Ontiveros, and Padilla are currently under consideration in the 19th Congress. Notably, the proposed bill by Senator Ontiveros cites Fairwork as a reference to enact regulations that forward the welfare of gig workers. Going into the specific policy recommendations, we offer 3 areas for consideration. Note, however, that there is a wide space for discussion in this area, which we cannot exhaust due to limited time. First, the legal framework on employment relationship and its correlative rights, benefits, and protection. Addressing the issue of employment status is imperative to protect the rights and welfare of gig workers within the current legal framework. Recognizing gig workers as employees through the test of employment relationship would grant them the benefits and protections under the Labor Code. Alternatively, considering the distinctive nature of gig economy work, it may be necessary to introduce a new legal framework specifically tailored to address the occupational safety needs and rights of gig workers, regardless of employment status. This legislation should bridge the disparity between platform workers and traditional employees by granting them equivalent rights and benefits. In either of these policy options, the most pressing need is to ensure that gig workers receive living wages after cost. As mentioned by Dr. Binghay, the financial insecurity experienced by gig workers, coupled with the increasing dependence of such workers on gig work as their main source of livelihood, as well as the significant contribution of this sector to the Philippine economy, presents a critical policy gap. Second, the government-mandated Social Security and health insurance. These are 2 of the most crucial safety nets of a Filipino worker. Although gig workers can apply for Social Security from the Social Security system and health insurance from PhilHealth, the self-employed, they lose out on employer contributions that are reserved as a matter of right only for employees, which means that gig workers are expected to solely shoulder such contributions without any counterpart contribution from the platforms. Legislation should be enacted obligating platforms to contribute to the government-mandated social security and health insurance of the gig workers that they engage, without conditioning such contributions on employment relationships. This way, another layer of safety net is added to gig workers, considering the amplified risks and vulnerabilities that their nature of work entails. Third and lastly, compensation and insurance coverage for work-related illness and injury. The evidence clearly shows that there are greater risks of accidents leading to protracted disability in gig work. Because gig workers are generally considered as independent contractors, again, they are excluded from the coverage of employees' compensation programs that provide monetary compensation depending on the degree of illness or injury incurred by the worker. Add to this the complex issue of active hours in platform work in determining which work may be compensated in case of accidents. Due to this limitation, some platforms have taken the initiative to offer group life and accident insurance coverage. As mentioned by Dr. Binghay, despite such coverage, there are still issues on its efficacy. To this end, legislation should be enacted to allow gig workers, regardless of employment status, to claim from the employees' compensation program for work-related illness and injury, which should include wait times when workers are not any less exposed to risks of accident. From an administrative standpoint, the Insurance Commission should take active steps to ensure that gig workers can successfully claim in rightful circumstances through processes that consider their precarious and unstable nature of work. Addressing the policy gaps in the platform-based ride-hailing and delivery sector in the Philippines that go beyond compliance is urgent and requires a collaborative effort from the platforms, the government, and the worker representatives. Platforms continue to grow in reach and scale, outpacing labor governance mechanisms and the capacity of our regulatory frameworks to respond to emerging issues. We need to address business risks that are being pushed down to at-risk workers. If we do not attend to this now, we will have a large segment of our labor force in the near future that is physically depleted yet without access to insurance or protection, which of course reinforces cycles of insecurity and poverty.
Thank you very much to the Fairwork Philippines team for the insightful report presentation. We hope that this project will shape a fairer future of work for all. The team is also working on a Filipino translation of the report, which will be available very soon on the Fairwork website. So sana ay inyong na-enjoy panonood ng report presentation ng Fairwork Philippines team. Gusto na nating batiin na mga nanonood sa Facebook Live at meron tayong gustong i-mention din na comment. No? Sabi ni Sir Warren Dave Duwaki, sa pool lahat ng nasabi, lahat ng yan na i-experience ng mga riders. So salamat Sir Warren sa panonood ng aming report launch. More power po sa mga gig workers natin sa Philippines. Let us now give our panelists the floor to respond to the report. So today we have Mr. Don Pangan from Pagulong and Mr. Jeffrey Labudahon from Rider Centro. So i-welcome po natin sila. Kung pwede po tayo mag-on ng ating camera, Sir Don and Sir Jeffrey. Salamat po. So for our first panel, we will have Mr. Don Pangan from Pagulong. Pwede na po kayong magsimula ng inyong panel assessment, Sir Don.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. At, una, congratulations sa Fairwork Philippines sa pangalawang report na nailabas na nila. Yun nga, sabi nga nung ating isang kapatid na rider, no, na nag-comment sa Facebook, sa pool lahat, no, nung mga nasabi at totoong na-experience ng riders. Well, Hindi yan kaduda-duda dahil yung method at yung pamamaraan ng Fairwork Philippines ay base dun sa mga aktual na nararanasan ng mga kapatid nating riders na nasa gig economy. So, ang striking sa akin dun sa report talaga yung yung financial insecurity. Since last report ng Fairwork Philippines, isa ito sa pinaka glaring na problema talaga ng ating mga riders. Nagsasanga sa iba't ibang aspeto, no? So, yung financial insecurity, yung kakulangan ng kinikita ng ating mga riders, yung kakulangan ng inuuwi sa bahay ng mga riders na kita ay hindi yan ang expectation nila nung pumasok sa gig economy, no? Pumasok sila sa trabahong ito na natutuwa sila dahil ito hawak daw nila yung kanilang oras, 'di ba? At malaya silang kikita ayon sa kanilang kung kailan nila gustong bumiyahe at mag-book, 'di ba? Pero habang tumatagal, mula nung pagkatapos ng hindi naman pagkatapos, mula nung magbukas yung muling magbukas yung ating ekonomiya, no, nung paghupa nung pandemya, naging tumindi yung kompetisyon, dumami yung mga players sa platform economy, unti-unti nang nararamdaman ng ating mga kapatid yung paghigpit ng sinturon, no? O pagliit ng kanilang kita. So doon sa kwentada ng Fairwork Philippines based sa experience ng riders, kapareho ito nung inilabas din namin last year, no? Ang sa amin average 800 pesos per day kung ikaw ay magtatrabaho sa loob ng 8 to 10 hours. Tapos pag binawas mo yung mga ilang mga gastusin katulad ng cellphone load, gasolina, maintenance, at iba pa, umaabot na lamang ng 420 pesos yung naiuwi ng isang rider sa kanyang pamilya. So yun yung last year na pag-aaral namin at pakikipagpanayam namin sa mga kapatid na delivery riders, no, sa parcel tsaka sa food delivery, no. At yun nga, kahit pa magtrabaho din yung asawa sa parehong industriya, mag-deliver din siya, 420 times 2, 840, kulang pa rin kumpara dun sa itinatakdang living wage, no, na mahigit 1,000 sa isang araw na dapat kitain sa isang pamilya, no, para matugunan yung mga basic na pangangailangan ng ating mga kapatid na riders na may pamilya, no. So talagang kulang na kulang, talagang glaring yung financial insecurity dito sa industriyang ito. At yan ay nag-uugat nga doon sa kawalan ng regulasyon, no? Kawalan ng intervention ng gobyerno. Paano ba natin mai-insure, no? Paano ba mai-insure ng ating gobyerno, ng ating pamahalaan na dapat ay kumikita ng sapat, no? Hindi man sobra kundi sapat yung ating mga delivery riders sa kabila nung yun nga, mahigit 8 oras lang nagtatrabaho, 'di ba? So napakatindi. Tas minsan talagang parang napipilitan na lang lunukin ng mga riders yung ganyang klaseng sitwasyon. At isang example, no, yung isang experience ng ating delivery riders from parcel delivery, na kumikita lang siya ng higit 1,000, nakakapag-uwi lang siya ng mahigit 1,000 kung siya ay magbo-book for 12 to 16 hours, no? Ilang oras na lang ang natitira sa kanyang pahinga, ilang oras na lang ang tulog niya, 'di ba? Bago sasabak na naman sa susunod na araw. para lang kitain yung mahigit 1,000, para lang kitain yung living wage, no? So napaka saklap ng kanilang kondisyon. No, tapos idagdag mo pa diyan yun ngang kawalan ng yung seguridad, 'di ba? Seguridad sa trabaho. Yung proteksyon. Alam naman natin na very vulnerable ang ating mga kapatid na delivery riders sa pollution, sa hindi magandang kondisyon sa kalsada, no? Aksidente, pagkakasakit, at nabanggit na rin ni Sir Binghay yung nangyari kay Noel Escote na siyang isa sa tinulungan din ng kagulong, no, na ma-highlight yung nangyari. Kung actually ang isang side story diyan, no, marami po na hindi lang po si Noel Escote ang namatay o nabawian ng buhay sa gitna ng pagtatrabaho. Sa gitna ng pagtatrabaho bilang gig driver. Marami pa. At ang masaklap doon, hindi lahat ng mga kapatid nating delivery riders na nabawian ng buhay dahil diyan ay nakatanggap ng same aid o tulong mula doon sa kumpanya. Naobliga lang ang kumpanya na magbigay ng reasonable amount ng tulong dahil na-highlight sa media, na-caught yung attention ng ilang mga senador, kaya nagbigay ng tulong. Pero nung una, napakatigas ng kumpanya na sinasabing wala silang responsibilidad sa mga riders nila dahil sila ay mga independent contractors. Ang sakit isipin na pagkatapos mong pakinabangan, pagkatapos mong kumikita dahil sa kanya, sasabihin mo nung mamatay, ay sasabihin mo wala kang responsibilidad. Wala kang pananagutan kung ano man ang mangyari sa iyong delivery rider na pinagkakitaan mo ng ilang buwan, ilang taon. Kaya kailangan na itong ma-address no? Mula nung nagsimula tayo na caught yung attention ng pamahalaan at magsimula tayong mag-organize, medyo mabagal talaga. Tingin ko mabagal yung action ng ating pamahalaan. At the same time, hindi talaga gaanong na-highlight yung sitwasyon ng ating mga delivery riders. Na kailangan na talaga ng urgent action mula sa ating gobyerno. Though merong mga efforts sa legislature, katulad nung bill na inihain ni Senator Risa Ontiveros, yung Power Act, na layo na magbigay ng proteksyon sa mga platform workers natin. Alam naman natin sa legislature, hindi ganun kabilis ang proseso para makapagpasa tayo ng batas. Tingin ko it's high time to push our efforts ng mas doble sa pakikipag-engage sa executive para kahit papano, dahil ang executive department, particularly ang Department of Labor and Employment ay makagawa, no? Makagawa ng isang department order or whatever executive actions para tugunan unang-una yung usapin sa kawalan ng regulasyon pagdating sa fare, sa pasahod sa mga manggagawa nating mga lead riders. Ikalawa, yung sinasabi ni Attorney JB kanina sa insurance at sa social protection na dapat talaga may counterpart ang mga employers pagdating dyan. Isa yan sa mga, meron tayong mga accounts na nag-o-offer naman yung mga kumpanya na at nag-encourage sa kanilang mga delivery riders na mag-membro ng SSS, PhilHealth. Pero ang katotohanan, dahil hindi sila empleyado, wala yung employer contribution, no? Employer responsibility. So nakaka-discourage sa part ng mga riders na soslohin nila yung responsibilidad sa pagkakaroon ng social protection, no? hindi biro eh. Malaki ang mababawas. Maliit na nga yung kinikita, ang laki pa ng makakaligtas doon sa kanilang inaiuwi sa bahay. Dagdag pasanin 'yan. So kinakailangan talaga dahil kinakailangan talaga na meron din talagang responsibilidad yung mga employers o itong mga platform companies na tulungan, na ayudahan, no, na ma-ensure yung kanilang yung social protection ng ating mga kapatid na riders. No? So yun ang dalawa sa glaring dito sa report na to pag pinag-usapan natin yung kabuang tema ng 2023 report ng Fairwork Philippines, yung sa usapin ng kaligtasan sa seguridad sa empleo, no. So nire-raise na natin yan noon, pero mukhang kinakailangan natin talagang mag-double effort, no? Doblehin pa ang ating mga efforts to push forward this proposals, this policy proposal para matugunan, no, yung problema ng ating mga problema kinakaharap ng ating mga riders. At isa pa, kinakailangan din natin doble effort sa pag-shape, no? Pag-shape yung isa sa mga weakness na nakikita ko, no, both sa mga organizations at sa iba pang mga advocates, no, ay yung kahinaan ng ating mga delivery riders pagdating sa capacity to claim their rights, no. Tingin ko hindi naman sa delivery riders lang 'yan, no. Kung bakit medyo naiiba at medyo behind tayo sa mga delivery riders sa ibang bansa, no? Particularly sa Europe, na napakataas ng rights claiming capacity nila. They were able to win over some policies na magbibigay sa kanila ng protection, no? Maabot sa UK Supreme Court, Spanish Parliament, at yung ibang mga bansa ay umaabot na sa point na na-unionize na yung mga delivery riders at nakakapag-CBA na, meron ng collective bargaining agreement with the platform companies. Tayo medyo laging behind dyan dahil dun sa problema natin sa rights claiming capacity ng ating mga kababayan at mga kapatid na delivery. So we need also to exert more effort in educating our fellow delivery riders, gig riders, dun sa pag-realize sa kanilang na ito ay kanilang karapatan, na ito ay kanilang hindi ito simpleng pribilehiyo, ito ay karapatan na dapat ay tinatamasa hindi lang ng mga considered ng batas na empleyado, kundi itong mga kasama natin na mga delivery riders ay mga empleyado rin na dapat nagtatamasa ng ganong klaseng karapatan. So, yun lang po muna, at kung meron pong tanong siguro mamaya, willing naman po tayo sumagot. Maraming po salamat at magandang hapon sa inyo.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Don. So bago po tayo pumunta kay Sir Jeffrey, pinapaalalahanan lang natin ng ating audience na pwede po tayong mag-submit ng ating mga tanong gamit ang Q&A feature ng ating Zoom webinar. At para naman sa mga nanonood sa Facebook, pwede kayong mag-comment sa ating live stream para sa inyong mga tanong. So bago tayo pumunta kay Sir Jeffrey, no, gusto nating imbitahan ng lahat na i-access ang 2023 report sa Fairwork website. Ito ay www.fair.work. Pwede po nating ma-access ang report sa Fairwork website. So i-welcome po natin si Sir Jeffrey para magbigay ng kanyang panel assessment. Pwede na po kayo magsimula, Sir Jeffrey.
Sige, magandang hapon ulit sa mga kasama niyo. Ako ulit si Job. Ako yung National Coordinator ng National Union of Food Delivery Riders na affiliated sa Labor Center na Sentro at affiliated din sa International Union of Food at meron ding cooperation work with the Solidarity Center. Ako, unang komento ko lang, kinabahan nga ako mabuti hindi nag-English doon. Marami kasing nakikinig sa atin at magaganda yung mga punto na sinabi ng dalawang doktor na kasama natin at same thing yung sinabi ni attorney. Baka yung mga susunod na report launching tapos mag-invite tayo ng mga delivery riders, baka mas okay na gawin siya sa lengguwaheng Filipino o Tagalog para mas madaling naiintindihan, hindi na nagta-translate pa doon sa mga kasama. Yun lang yung una. Tapos pangalawa, kino-congratulate ko ulit yung Fairwork sa ikalawang report. No, yung 2022 na report ninyo, sobrang tulong yan sa amin, no? Nakatulong talaga yan. Although may mga ginawa din tayong research, yung sentro, tsaka yung learn. Pero yung Fairwork talaga ay ginagamit din namin sa mga basic orientation seminars, tsaka basic trade unionism seminars na nagbibigay ito ng diin dun na meron talagang problema dun sa working conditions ng mga delivery riders. No? So, salamat sa Fairwork sa pagpapagamit ng inyong mga data. At papaunahan ko na, no? Nakita ko agad talaga pagkabasa ko, bagsak na naman. So medyo nakakalungkot. Ginagamit din namin yung Fairwork na report. Additional to na bala dun sa mga argumento namin, sa mga engagement namin sa gobyerno, sa local government, sa Senate, no? Sa House. So nagagamit din namin siya doon. Sige, bago lang ako magsimula dun sa limang aming komento. So after namin itong ma-receive, no, sinend out sa mga leaders, tapos nagkaroon lang ng mabilis na diskusyon at ano yung mga collective na aming magiging komento. So yung una ay limitado yung aming komento dun sa motorcycle delivery riders lang. Wala kaming masyadong engagement, although may mga contacts, may mga nakakausap, pero hindi sapat yun para magbigay kami ng komento dun sa mga nasa taxi, nasa kotse, no, sa grab car in particular, sa borso, so something like that. Pero yung iba naman ay kaya naman. Yung una ay dun sa makatarungang sahod o fair pay. Balikan ko lang ng konti, no, isang nag-attract talaga sa mga delivery riders para pumasok sa gig economy ay yung sahod na mas mataas sa minimum wage, no? Although wala namang may gusto ng minimum wage, pero kagaya nung kagulong na merong competition din na lumabas at yung mga kasama sa Fairwork, yung research team ng sentro ay naglabas din, no? At hindi ko na iisa-isahin. Isa lang din yung sinasabi niya, no? Yung nag-attract dun sa mga delivery riders para makakuha ng mas mataas sa minimum wage ay pag tinotal mo, pag kinumpute mo, mas mababa pa sa minimum wage talaga yung nakukuha. So hindi rin nila nakuha yun, no? Hindi rin nila na-achieve. Hindi mo pa sinasama dyan yung overtime, yung night shift differential, yung mga holiday premiums. Tapos mas malala ngayon, hindi pa natatapos yung 2023, ay pahirapan pa kumuha ng schedules ngayon kay Food Panda. So parang raffle ngayon yung schedules, no? Talagang nakakaawa yung mga kasama natin pag hindi sila nakakuha. Limitado, no? Limitado. So dun sa makatarungang sahod o makatarungang kita ay nakikiisa kami dun sa desisyon, dun sa lumabas na report ng Fairwork na tama kayo, walang sino man sa app companies na ito na nag-ooperate sa Pilipinas ang dapat bigyan ng puntos. No, sa kabila ng merong Labor Advisory 1421 doon sa ikalawang A na nagsasabi na dapat merong assurance, no, merong guaranteed minimum wage to mga delivery riders once nag-log in sila sa loob ng 8 oras. So therefore, wala dapat bigyan ng puntos para doon. Doon naman sa makatarungang kalagayan sa trabaho, yung fair conditions, may mabilis lang ako na kwento. Nakita ko kasi namin na mayroong puntos para dun sa grab car. So ganito, sa isang tinutulungan natin na union, no, isang chapter natin sa Visayas, hindi ko na babanggitin kung saan doon, ay ginamit itong Anti-Union Act, itong pagkakaroon ng grab car. Bakit? Yung management na naka-base doon sa Visayas ay nag-set ng meeting sa mga officers ng ating union at inalok sila. Ang tawag ay promotion, no? So promotion, at ang sabi, from the motorcycle ay magkakaroon kayo ng access na magka-car na kayo, plus meron kayong 100,000 na loan. Pero yung kapalit nun ay hindi na kayo pwedeng bumalik dun sa pagmomotor. Kasama sa kapalit nun ay hindi na kayo magiging officer ng union. So, well, dahil hindi naman natin kayang kunin yung desisyon ng iba, ay merong mga nag-grab ng ganong tingin nila ay promotion, no? Pero habang naglalaon at pangangamusta sa kanila, so they are required na magbigay ng 3,000 per day na kita para mabayaran yung hulog dun sa sasakyan at sa utang nila na loan. So nagamit pa to sa aming union. Sige, tapos balik doon, lumabas din yung helmet, no? Totoo na yung helmet ay hindi pino-provide. Yung uniforms nga, no, nabanggit na yan kanina, no? Uniforms, yung bags ay kailangan mo munang ipangutang bago ka makabiyahe. So ngayon nasa around 3,000 to 4,000 yung kailangang bayaran ng delivery rider para siya makabiyahe o maka-start bumiyahe. Totoo na wala ring insurance, no? Ang tawag nga namin diyan sa rider sentro ay quota insurance. Bakit, no? Pag kinausap namin yung ibang areas, to be able na maka-claim ka ng insurance o maka-avail ka ng insurance, kailangan mo ng certain number of rides. So yung isang kausap namin sa Visayas, ang kailangan nila 400 na rides, no? Para ma-cover sila ng insurance. So ang biruan nga namin, so kapag 399 hindi ka pa pwedeng ma-aksidente kasi hindi ka pa covered ng insurance, no? Sa ibang areas dito sa Luzon, merong 300. So same thing, kailangan madisgrasya ka bandang 301, 302 para ma-covered ka ng insurance. So totally parang wala ding insurance talaga. So ang binibigay ngayon ay reimbursement, no? Ayan yung pinapangalandakan ng mga app companies, reimbursement. Pero ang discussion nga sa amin diyan yung delivery rider na maliit yung kita, maghahanap ba yan ng mamahaling ospital? Hindi. No, hahanap yan ng clinic na mura kung saan yung available na pera ng pamilya niya, yung kanyang immediate na magagamit para ma-reimburse. So wala rin. Ako dagdag ko lang din dun sa dapat na lumabas sa conditions, yung mga waiting areas ng mga delivery riders, no. Kasi ito yung resting areas nila, dito sila nagcha-charge ng phone, no, naghihintay ng book, ng another ng ride, nagre-refill ng tubig, no, silungan nila. Sa ngayon, naka-specify naman yan sa Labor Advisory 1421, no? Nasa last part yan, na dapat yung yung company ay nakikipag-arrange do sa kanyang merchant sa LGU na merong tambayan o hintayan itong mga delivery riders. Pero nakakalungkot na sa malaking bahagi pa ng ating bansa ay walang mga silungan yung mga delivery rider, nagbabayad sila ng parking fees, nakasilong sila sa mga nakaparadang jeepney, nakaparadang tricycle, no, sa puno. So yun, isa yun sa mga hindi naabot no patas na kondisyon. In addition dun sa kondisyon ay gusto ko lang diinan yung personal protective equipment dahil ako rin ay nagmomotor. So naka-emphasize doon na yung personal protective equipment ay pino-provide dapat, no? Ang lumabas sa report natin helmet. Pero pag nagmomotor ka kasi, ang ibig sabihin ng personal protective equipment ay meron kang knee pad, no? Meron kang elbow pad, meron kang padded na jacket, tsaka pants. Pero hindi na kino-cross out na nga natin yun . Yung ultimong PPE na lang, no? Yung face mask na lang ay hindi pa kayang i-provide ng mga delivery companies na to. At ito ay nanggagaling pa sa bulsa ng mga delivery rider. So with that, muli, tama ang Fairwork ng majority ng mga gig companies ay hindi nagbibigay ng patas na working conditions sa mga delivery riders. Dito naman sa makatarungang kontrata o sa fair contract, mga 13 years na rin ako, 12 to 13 years na ako sa Kilusang Union o sa Kilusang Paggawa. So naging bahagi na rin ako ng mga negotiation panel ng collective bargaining agreement. So para sa aming opinion, yung medyo malapit-lapit sa salitang patas ay yung mga collective bargaining agreement. Ayun yung kontrata na patas. Kasi bilateral nag-usap, bilateral nagkasundo, Then afterwards, nirehistro sa Department of Labor and Employment para maging batas sa both parties. Sorry sa na lumabas na binigyan ng puntos yung isang app, pero para sa aming pagtingin, yung terms and conditions ay hindi yan kontrata. Ito ay nagsasabi lang na ito yung kondisyon namin, freelancer ka man o empleyado ka, take it or leave it. Kung gusto mo to, i-click mo. Kung ayaw mo, huwag kang magtrabaho sa amin. So therefore, para sa aming pagtingin, hindi yung kontrata. Dahil yung kontrata, dapat nag-agree yung both parties. So yung nangyayari kasi ngayon sa ating mga delivery app, ay click mo, nabasa mo, kahit Tagalog pa yan, pag kinilik mo, okay ka na. No, tanggap mo na kung ano man yung mga nakasulat dyan. At maliban doon sa nakita namin na terms and conditions, ay sumasang-ayon yung Rider Centro na walang malinaw, walang patas na kontrata ang namamagitan sa mga delivery riders at sa mga kinatawan ng mga delivery companies na to. Kaya nga yung number 1 sa position paper namin nung pinatawag tayo sa Senate ay dapat merong individual na contract kung i-consider na freelancers talaga itong mga delivery rider. So merong klaro kung sino yung kakontrata, klaro sa kontrata magkano yung kita niya dapat, sino magpo-provide ng maintenance niya, sino magpo-provide ng insurance niya. So yun. Para naman sa kung patas ba yung management o makatarungan bang namamahala itong mga delivery app management, para sa amin, ang unang sukatan ay merong communication, no? Kung talagang nag-uusap. Pero hindi pala yun, no? So, yun nangyayari. Halimbawa, lahat ng food panda ngayon, ang base na nila lahat ay sa Makati. No? Bihirang-bihira makita, in particular dun sa mga chapters namin, na meron pang opisina si food panda dun sa mga areas. So ngayon, sino kakausapin ng delivery rider pag meron siya concern? AI, no? AI, yung robot. Yung robot na paulit-ulit yung sagot. No? Proceed, take note. So ano yun eh, robot yun eh. So walang puso, walang pakialam yun sa emosyon ng mga delivery rider. So yun yung una. Meron lang din kaming comment dun sa naging puntos para sa isang app, no? Sa Grab. Siguro baka dun sa ibang mga nakausap. Pero sa karanasan kasi nung Rider Centro, meron kaming ongoing cases ngayon. Illegal suspension tsaka illegal dismissal, in particular sa Pampanga. So, yung mga delivery rider namin na nag-practice, yung members na nag-practice ng kanilang karapatan sa pag-uunyon, right to strike, ay inimbentuhan ng kaso at tinanggal at sinuspend. No, yung isa nga nakakatawa, indefinite suspension. So, sa batas, ang pinakamatagal na suspension ay 30 days lang. So, yung kasamahan namin na babae pa, ibinigyan ng indefinite. So, may pending case. Meron ding pending case na ngayon sa Iloilo. Merong pending case sa NCR. At muntikan ang maging case, no, kung hindi na-settle sa Sena Conference, yung sa Iloilo after nilang magkaroon ng unity ride. Dahil nananawagan sila ng maayos na kita. So, hindi ko alam kung ano yung tamang word, pero sa amin ay hindi dapat pinuntusan si Grab dahil sa karanasan namin, wala naman talagang maayos na pagmamanage si Grab sa aming based sa aming mga karanasan. Yeah, tapos maliban doon ay we all agree na hindi nga makatarungan yung majority, no? Majority ng mga delivery app companies kung paano nila minamanage yung kanilang riders, yung kanilang sistema at yung hindi sila patas mag-manage dun sa kanilang mga delivery riders. Yung last na sa panglima, yung fair representation, no, yung makatarungang representasyon. Ganito, yung imbis na sa amin, imbis na i-recognize yung Rider Centro, ang nagiging sukli dun sa ginagawa namin pag-organize at pag-educate sa mga delivery riders ay retaliatory, no? Nire-resbackan pa kami. Ano yung mga resback na ginagawa? Tine-terminate yung mga leaders. No? Kung hindi terminate ay dahil alam nila magpa-file kami ng illegal dismissal o illegal suspension ay nilalagyan nila ng post-booking. Yung post-booking naka-on yung account nila pero hindi sila nababagsakan ng mga work, no, ng mga trabaho. So therefore nakatenga lang sila hanggang maubos yung araw nila. So yung ibang tawag doon shadow banning, no, parang nakaban ka. Iba pang atake na ginagawa sa union ay syempre common na common sa gobyerno natin ngayon ay i-red tag yung mga nag-uunion o yung mga nag-exercise ng karapatan nila. Ginagawa rin ay imbis na i-recognize ay binibili yung mga leader na particular yung mga presidente. Nakakatawa, no? Pinapainom, pinapakain, sasabihin, hindi nyo na kailangan mag-union, no? Mag-usap na lang tayo, at hindi rin nasasagot yung problemang pangkalahatan ng mga delivery rider. In addition doon sa representation, may mga karanasan din kami kapag nagkakanda kami ng mga unity rides, nagsiset kami ng union meetings, general assemblies, ay imbis nga na i-recognize, ang ginagawa ng management ay biglaang magsiset ng mga sports fest, nagpapatawag ng pa-meeting, anything na pwedeng magbigay ng kalituhan o hindi mag-participate yung mga delivery riders dun sa mga ginagawa nating initiative. Yung hindi sila may educate ay hinaharang kaagad ng mga management. So therefore, hindi talaga ma-establish yung representation. Yeah, yun yung 5 naming punto. At nakakalungkot, no, pero ganun pa man, gagamitin pa rin namin itong ikalawang report para sabihin na muli, kailangan talaga nating mag-union, kailangan nating mag-organize kasi kailangan nating baguhin yung ating kalagayan. At ito yung pangalawang patunay ngayong 2023 na muling bumagsak ayon sa Fairwork ang mga delivery app dito sa ating bansa. So gagamitin din namin ito para hindi lang ipaalam sa mga members, no, additional organizing. Gagamitin din namin ito para itulak yung Charter of Rights na ipinupush natin sa Senate, sa LGUs, at sa House of Representatives. Yun lang muna. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Don and Sir Joff, para sa inyong insights. No? Grabe talaga ang mga experiences na aming nalaman, no? Throughout, even during the data gathering ng Fairwork Philippines team. Ibang-iba pa rin yung marinig yung mga worker stories na ganito. No? Meron na tayong mga nakuhang mga tanong. Salamat ulit, Sir Don and Sir Joff. No? Nais ng Fairwork Philippines team na palawakin ang diskusyon ukol sa gig work at ang working conditions na kinakaharap ngayon ng libo-libong gig workers. Your insights and perspectives provides us and the audience a deeper understanding of the current conditions of gig work in the Philippines. Now it's time to move to the Q&A session of the event. So reminder lang po ulit sa ating audience, you can use the Q&A feature of Zoom. At para naman sa mga Facebook viewers natin, you can use the comment sections to submit your questions. No? We will now open the floor for audience questions and we invite our panel, Sir Don and Sir Joff, as well as our report authors to turn on their cameras as we can direct some of the questions that we have received already to you. So, ating simulan ang ating Q&A, no? Unang-una para sa ating tanong. From Jocelyn Obra. Magandang hapon po, Jocelyn. Ang tanong niya, is it required that all delivery riders must register to an organization or union for riders? What if he or she is not a member? Can they claim some of the benefits as you have mentioned? So, i-open ko po itong tanong na ito kay Prof. Dong Binghay at siguro para na rin sa ating panel, no, Sir Don and Sir Joff, pwede po kayong mag-add ng inyong sagot. So, sige po.
Marami pong klaseng union, no? So, pwedeng may union tayo, pagkasama-sama tayo, no? Ina-address natin yung mga problema natin. Pero mayroon ding union na tinatawag na may karapatan to negotiate, to bargain. Dito na nga po papasok yung binanggit ni Attorney JV kanina, yung classification issue nitong ganitong klaseng manggagawa na hanggang ngayon hindi pa naayos ng Kongreso, ng gobyerno. Kailangan talaga bilisan nila yung ano ba talagang classification nito. Kasi ang collective bargaining negotiation presupposes na itong bargaining unit ay nagkaroon ng maliwanag yung bargaining unit, naka-register yung union, and then they sit down together, management sa union, to negotiate terms and conditions of employment. Now hanggang hindi pa naayos to, unionization can still be done, collectives, but maybe not as powerful as yung what we have in a traditional work arrangement, kung saan traditional work na nandyan yung naghahain ng mga terms and conditions of employment yung mga manggagawa at pinapakinggan naman ng employer. So ang nangyari po kasi ganito, no, yung sa findings namin is that yung mga manggagawa na ito tulong-tulong na lang sila. No? So parang may mga issues sila, may mga concerns sila, nakakaawa nga kasi sila na rin nagtutulungan. So meron silang mga group chat, no? Itong mga kung ano naman yung pwede sila makapag-usap-usap para mapag-usapan nila yung problema nila. That is still form of collectives, no? Pero hanggang hindi nga naayos ito ng gobyerno, kaya dapat talaga bilisan ng gobyerno na ayusin yung classification na yan kasi dito nag-ugat. Kaya hindi sila makapasok sa SS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, no, pati yung Employees Compensation, ECC, Employees Compensation Commission, dahil nga doon sa kanilang kino-consider silang partner and so on and so forth. But I enjoined the trade unions, particularly doon sa mainstream, no, trade unions, na talagang i-educate din itong mga riders natin na ito. Maybe baka sooner papunta na rin yan doon, no? Lalo na pag nagkaroon na ng proper classification itong mga manggagawang ito.
Maraming salamat po, Prof. Dong. Sir Don and Sir Joff, may gusto po ba kayong idagdag para masagot itong tanong ni Jocelyn? Yes po.
Ako po, sige. Sa practice namin sa Riders Centro, dahil union nga ito, lagi namin sinasabi, hindi ito Riders Club. Minsan ay yung nako-connotate na, well, ginagamit din sa amin yan, no, ng ilang mga app companies na hindi naman kayo union, no? Mga Riders Club lang kayo. So, etc. So, titigil lang itong mga company na to pag pinakita namin yung aming mga legal documents. So, with that, kung yung tanong required, hindi siya required. Pero, sa practice namin, sa Riders Centro, para bago ka mag-decide kung magme-member ka o hindi, kailangan mo munang dumaan sa dalawang set ng seminar. Yung una, yung basic orientation seminar, nagkaroon siya ng 2 hours, pero mostly pagpapaliwanag ng mga success stories, ng mga victories, ng mga collective effort. No, pag nagkaisa, ito yung kayang gawin. So ano yung long-term na pagkakaisa? Ayun yung pag-uusapan sa basic trade unionism seminar. Pagkatapos doon ay ano yung long-term, yung union, no? Anong legal basis nito, ano yung mga programa dapat nito, etc. etc. So, doon magde-decide yung member kung gusto niya, yung rider kung gusto niya mag-member o hindi. Kung tanong kung required o hindi siya required.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Joff, no? So punta po tayo sa ating next question from Sir Alan Alegre, no? Good afternoon. Congrats Fairwork on the very timely and relevant research. So ang tanong po niya is, first, do we have a mapping of the PH cities or Philippine cities where gig work is currently present and the number of gig workers at present? Ano daw rin po ang mga geographical areas kung saan galing ang ating mga worker interviewees, no? I-open ko po ito sa ating mga report authors. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Al, at maraming salamat din pauna kay Joff saka kay Don. Very much, bago ko sagutin yung tanong ni Al, no, pasasalamat lang sa ating mga worker organizations. Una, sa ginagawa ninyo. At pangalawa, sa pag-participate dito. We value your inputs. At lalo na lahat ng inputs sa engagement namin sa inyo, it also gives us clues dun sa tatanungin namin sa susunod na year round. So, kaya kami nagka-clue sa pagtanong tungkol sa paano ka ba nakaka-access ng gig? Paano ka ba nagsisimula? At doon namin natuklasan yung
utang na pinagdadaanan ng mga worker para lang makapasok sa gig economy ay sa pamamagitan din na makikipag-usap sa mga worker organizations na ito. So lahat ng inputs ninyo at comments kanina ay tinitake into consideration namin. So sa tanong ni Al, last year sa report namin, we tried to map nasaan yung mga gig workers and wala tayong official statistics ukol dito. Of course, parang ni-reconstruct namin yung calculations namin of close to over 500,000 workers by reconstructing the data that was available individually from the websites of the platforms. So kung meron sana tayong mechanisms to harmonize this data or to require platforms to report to government, and kung meron tayong monitoring mechanism sana, meron sana tayong datos. Kaso wala nga. Pero in response to your question, sa pakikipag-usap namin, it appears to us na nakalaganap na siya sa buong archipelago ng Pilipinas, no? At para sa report namin, ang mga respondents ay nanggaling karamihan sa National Capital Region, Manila, Las Piñas, Makati, Pasay, Taguig, Marikina, Navotas, Parañaque at Valenzuela, at sa rest from surrounding provinces katulad ng Rizal, Cavite, Laguna, Bulacan, Pampanga, Tarlac, hanggang Naga, at pati meron din kaming respondents mula sa Cebu at sa ibang regions. In relation to gender, parang consistent. From last year, nakakausap kami at hanggang ngayong taon, nakakausap kami ng mga 10 to 11% ng workers. And tingin namin baka mas maliit sa actual na total yung representasyon ng mga kababaihan. So majority sa kanya talaga kalalakihan. But it seems to us na dumadami rin yung mga babae, hindi lang siguro documented. And dito rin sa report na nilaunch namin, meron tayong segment dito tungkol sa experience ng mga kababaihan na gig workers, which we did not get to emphasize nung nakaraang taon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soriano. No? So in the interest of time, we will entertain 3 more questions. No? Ito, napakaganda ng kanyang tanong. No? Si Jean Gorospe. Ang tanong niya, who has the greater and primary responsibility to act on the recommendations of the report? Platforms or government? So, i-open ko po ito sa ating mga speakers. No?
Actually, both. No? Can I speak?
Go ahead po.
Actually, both. No? The government should make sure that the legislation for the gig workers ay na-put into place. Sa kanila talaga yan. Pero paano naman yung platform companies? Dapat meron din silang can do things within their area of influence. Number 1, health and safety pinag-usapan natin dito. So, importante dito na meron silang magandang recruitment and selection ng mga riders nila. Base kasi doon sa aming interviews, hindi thorough yung recruitment and selection. So basta nandyan lang yung basic element, you know how to ride, etc. But there should be more to it kasi may mga DNA yung mga prone to accident kaysa hindi prone to accident. That is number 1. Number 2, importante na magkaroon sila ng talagang regularity of training pagdating sa safety at saka maintenance ng vehicles. Ang tawag natin dito in HR, corporate university, pagdating sa aspetong ito. Kasi ito yung business nila eh. Dapat related doon yung learning na dapat isi-share nila sa kanilang mga tao. Number 3, very important, they should establish health and safety committee. Health and safety committee should be comprised of representatives from the platform at saka yung mga riders o mga workers. Another, number 4, importante na talagang all the platforms should have accident and health insurance. No, marami actually, marami akong kaibigan nagbebenta ng mga ganitong insurance, no? Maraming choices. Pero maganda din siguro dito kasi itong mga workers ay talagang alam nila kung anong needs nila. Meron silang say sa pagpili na kung ano man yung kukunin na insurance company na attune dun sa kanilang needs. Another one is that it is important that when they have a contract, itong platform with these insurance companies, part of the education, no? Part of the education should be coming from doon sa mga insurance companies na ito. Kasi maraming technicalities ito. Isa sa mga issues kasi na lumabas ay yung hindi aware paano hindi alam kung paano i-avail, no, etc. etc. Maraming gaps in terms of communication. Another one pagdating sa mental health. Importante magkaroon ng employee engagement. Yung like town hall meeting, no? Like discussions about health and safety. Meron sila dapat mga ganun para itong mga tao na to hindi disenfranchised as if they are feeling lonely kasi kanya-kanya silang nabanggit sa report yung free gear. Dapat yung talaga i-invest ng company nito. Nabanggit nga ni Dr. Soriano yung example ng social enterprises. Sustainable naman no? Kasi una, yung kanilang workers din ay medyo engaged, saka they like the way the company is being run, no? So siguro this is one model that they can explore aside from just purely, I should say, profit, no? Meron ding more caring on the part of the people. Isa sa mga issue pa dito yung compensation scheme. Yung compensation scheme na talagang kailangan nilang ayusin. Kaya naman yung mga tao, kailangan nilang magtatrabaho talagang ang haba-haba ng panahon kasi una, hindi na-regulate yung compensation scheme. Dapat pag-aralan nila yun in such a way that yung number of hours spent to work ay tama lang sa isang tao. Hindi yung magkakaroon siya ng fatigue dahil na kailangan talagang kumita ng kumita. Maybe something that should control kung kailan dapat sila lalabas, no? Ilang oras sila dapat magre-rest. Okay, another one is that siguro very important yung data privacy. Lalo na ngayon, maraming manluloko. Importante dyan siguro encrypted yung mga datos na pinamimigay nitong, magkaroon ng more robust itong mga platform companies na ito. No? Another one is that they should dialogue with mga LGUs. Kasi isa sa mga complaints, base doon sa aming interviews, daming lubak-lubak na daan, no? Maraming mga roads na walang signages, tapos may mga lasing na nandoon sa kaloob-looban, na dadaanan nila. Minsan may mga hayop, may mga aso, natatakot sila makagat sila. At isa pa, yung mga bahay, walang proper numbering. Hindi na malaman kung nasaan yung pupuntahan nila, no? The LGU has to come into the picture here. Importante na sila doon. Another one, yung mga abusadong mga customer, let them be blocked. Kailangan iba-block yan. Dapat may binablock yan kasi there's no use generating income from this kind of people because they're destroying the workers. I-block yung mga yan. No? Tapos ano pa ba sinabi ko dito? Compensation system. Workforce planning, importante. Kaya dumadami yung mga work. Alam mo, kaya ang dami-dami na nila Ang tanong, given the business that you have, your business model, ilan ba talaga yung workers na kailangan mo? Kasi ngayon, hire. So ang nangyayari, sobra-sobra sila. So parang kung sa baga, the pie is just so na makaliit na mga makukuha ng mga tao. What I'm saying is that in the absence of clear policy at this point, platforms should move, should be caring for their workers. They should be more ethical in their practices. At the end of the day, they make business from these people. So if they really consider these people as partners, they should take care of these people as well. As they move forward, they take care of these people. Hindi to magma-mushroom kung hindi to kumikita. I heard that more and more platform companies are putting up in the Philippines. Hindi ito magma-mushroom pag hindi ito kumikita. What about sharing some of the profits to the workers? Lalo na pagdating sa health and safety.
Thank you po, Prof. Dong, for your answer. No? So we have another question from the Institute for Labor Studies from Dole. Sige po, Attorney G.
Sige.
Sige po, sorry. Sir Joe. Sige po.
Mabilis lang na addition
Sige
kung kanino i-address. Ako, same lang ako ng position. No? Dapat pareho. Pero yung tanong, sino may capacity mag-address? For sure, alam naman nila yan. No? For sure, alam naman nung mga delivery companies na meron na mga proposal, meron position paper na yung union, no? Yung Riders Centro. Pero yung pag lumabas, let's say no, lumabas no, naging batas yung freelance protection bill at laman noon yung mga naging position papers. Kahit naman batas yon, kung wala ring union, wala rin naman magi-implement noon, walang magbabantay ng implementation. So yun yung una. Kaya dapat i-address din yung government. Dapat ding ina-address yung platform, no? Kasi pwede ka namang kung marami yung mga riders at malakas yung union, pwede siyang makipag-collective bargaining agreement na mag-create ng pressure at makipag-agree o makipag-negotiate dun sa platform companies. No? Pero in the end, ang tanong ay, pareho yan nandyan, sino yung may capacity magpasa ng recommendation at magme-make sure na mag-i-implement. So wala nang iba, yung union lang din. Thanks.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Joff, no? So, punta po tayo, no, sa tanong ni Sir Dieter from Institute for Labor Studies of DOLE. Ito ay gusto ko sana ibigay kay Attorney JV, no? Ang tanong niya, given the limited social protection of workers in the gig economy, do you think that the existing institutional and administrative mechanism is still responsive to issues raised in the gig economy? Go ahead po, Attorney JV.
Okay, thank you for the question. Of course, clear as day naman dun sa report natin. The existing institutional and administrative mechanisms are not sufficient. That's why meron tayong napakalaking gap sa ating protection sa ating mga manggagawa. Gusto ko rin itong i-connect doon sa tanong kanina na sinagot ni Prof. Dong at ni Sir Joe. Okay? Ngayon, nakikita natin na yung mga gig workers, napakalaki ng contribution sa ating ekonomiya. Okay? Nung pandemic pa, yan ang inaasahan ng mga Pilipino, ng mga tao. Hanggang ngayon, sila pa rin ang inaasahan sa tuwing may kailangang ipa-deliver, sa kailangang mag-travel from place to place. At hindi na maiitanggi na maraming workers ang nakaasa sa kanilang panghanap buhay, sa kanilang pang-araw-araw dito sa gig work. Ang pinupunto ko dito, maraming umaasang mga Pilipino sa hanap buhay para dito, malaki ang contribution nito sa ekonomiya, kailangang punan ng pamahalaan ng gobyerno itong mga gap sa ating legal system. Unang-una na nga dito ang theme ng ating Fairwork Year 2 report, yung worker safety and protection. Na sa aming pananaw ng mga report authors, kung hindi pa handa yung ating mga institusyon, tulad ng NLRC o mga korte na mag-decide na talagang mga manggagawa o empleyado talaga ang ating mga gig workers, kailangan umuusad yung mga legislative proposal na makakapagbigay ng sapat na protection at kaakibat na protection sa ating mga gig workers na may nakatumbas din, no? Yung sa mga empleyado na kahit pa nga ano ang kanilang employment status kasi hinihintay pa natin no? Hinihintay pa natin yung ruling ng mga korte natin. So, tingin ko napakalaki nung space nung gap, no, sa ating existing institutions. Kaya ang isa sa aming mga policy recommendation at sana may pagpatuloy at mapa-detalye pa namin, no, kung ano ang nilalaman nito ay makapagbuo ng isang legal framework na makapagbibigay ng protection sa ating mga gig workers na hindi ikinukulong yung ating frame of mind o yung ating sarili na empleyado ba o hindi, no? Of course, gusto natin na maging empleyado para maka-receive ng mga benefits, pero sa ating paghihintay ngayon, ano yung pwede nating magawa muna? At siguro, idukto ko lang din doon sa sinabi ni Sir Joe, malaki rin ang role ng ating mga manggagawa mismo, ng mga union, at malaki rin ang role ng ating mga consumers, no? Kung malalaman ng mga consumers, ng mga nagbubook, kung gumagamit ng mga app na ito, ang totoong nangyayari o kalagayan ng mga gig workers natin, magkakaroon ng added pressure, hindi lamang sa gobyerno, pero pati na rin sa platforms, na punan itong mga gaps na ito, itong mga pagkukulang sa protection.
Thank you so much, Attorney JV. No? Grabe, parang talagang naiiba yung pagtingin natin sa mga gig workers. Lalo na siguro yung marami sa mga attendees natin, I'm sure gumagamit ng mga apps na ito. No? Ako personally, madalas akong gumamit ng mga courier, food. Kaya kahit pag-deliver lang, I'm able to know more of their story sa mga small talk namin pag nagde-deliver sila. Ibang perspective talaga ang naidadala nitong Fairwork report sa pag-unawa natin, no? At paggamit na rin as users ng mga apps na ito. So punta tayo sa ating last na tanong, no? From Ms. Kat Catalan. Dahil may mga kaso rin ng suspensions at dismissals based sa geolocation tracking, rating system at iba pa, meron na po bang mga pag-aaral sa data privacy o digital security ng gig riders? Ano na po kaya ang mga nagawang hakbang para ma-address ito? Doc Che.
Sige, sisimulan ko, but I will also invite Tobias later to maybe share if we have found, no, as a global Fairwork initiative, if we have found any good initiatives of other platforms elsewhere in other parts of the globe. So una, ang unique, no, sa sistema ng pagtrabaho dito sa gig economy ay ito nga, ang trabaho mo ay app mediated. So napakaganda ng tanong na to. So pwede kang masuspinde, pwede kang ma-dismiss sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng datos, kung nasaan ka, kung gaano ka kabilis maka-pick up, kung kinakancel mo yung trabaho, etc. etc. So hindi malinaw palagi sa worker kung ano ang implikasyon ng kanyang pagkilos, no, in relation sa kung paano ginagamit ang datos niya para ma-determine ang kita, whether makikip niya ang trabaho niya, ang incentive, ang ratings, etc. etc. So this lack of transparency is a major concern that we raised in the report, and also part of what we score, no, when we think about the second point for 4.2, which is fair management. No? So walang platform na nakakuha ng puntos na ito kahit isa sa 4.2. Ang tanong natin, paano ginagamit yung algorithms? No? Paano ginagawa ang pagkalkula ng distansya? Paano ginagawa ng algorithm? So maraming malabo, hindi transparent, para sa manggagawa, hindi rin transparent para sa atin bilang researchers unless i-compel, maaari, ng state, ng gobyerno na ipakita ng platforms kung paano exactly nila ginagamit ang datos para ma-determine yung mga decisions, no, na mahalaga sa that matters in how workers earn and also gain certain other incentives. So mahalaga, lalo na kung deactivation or suspension na yung pinag-uusapan. So maybe Tobias might want to share any other insights from our other Fairwork partners elsewhere, kung meron tayong nakitang if we have seen any good initiatives elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, and thank you, Dr. Soriano, for referring to other evidences from other countries. So definitely the point of fair management and data protection, this is also a hot topic in other countries, and we have seen quite a number of initiatives in other countries, especially in those countries that have quite a history already in terms of dealing with or like engaging with digital platforms, like for example in India or South Africa, and a number of platforms have been implemented measures to make their algorithms more transparent. For example, to implement data policies. For example, in India, several platforms have implemented external audits of their work allocation processes, their algorithmic processes, to check any biases, to check for any biases in the work allocation process. This is a very important issue there because the Fairwork principle also requires that there is no discrimination in terms or against any marginalized groups, and this is a very important topic in India and also South Africa. So this several platforms have responded to that issue also. Platforms are proactively providing equal opportunity measures for workers with disability, or also for other marginalized groups. For example, in South Africa, there also, I remember one platform is taking proactive measures and has made a lot of progress in contracting more female workers into the workforce. So on that end, we see that platforms are actually reacting and trying to implement measures to secure a more transparent and a more accessible work environments for different groups. In terms of automatic deactivations, there are also in the new Brazil report, for example, there has been one platform is highlighted that now secures that there are no automatic deactivations happening on the platforms. So also on that end, we see that measures are taken so that this kind of blockings and deactivations of workers that is happening automatically is not happening. This is also very important because once these kind of deactivations are forced on workers, it is quite it takes quite an effort for workers that could also last several days with no income to get active for platform workers and for platforms to reduce that kind of risk for workers. So I think that are some of the changes that platforms have made in terms of Principle 4, improving the appeals process, also implementing anti-discrimination policies. So actually for the Principle 4, we have seen quite a number of platform changes in the last couple of years. I think it is above 50 for the Principle 4. So I'm not sure whether this completely answers or some aspects of these questions. Yeah, please let me know if you have further questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soriano and Tobias. And with that, we will wrap up our Q&A. Maraming salamat po ulit sa ating report authors, to our panel, and of course, Tobias, for being with us here today. And thank you also to our audience for their very insightful questions. No? So thank you to everyone, again, who participated in today's launch. The Fairwork Philippines report will be available on the Fairwork website today. You may visit, again, the Fairwork website at www.fair.work. Before we end today's program, we would like to call on Ms. Marge Medina to introduce the Fairwork Pledge.
So thank you, Chana. And at the impact level, we have the Fairwork Pledge. I hope it's on your screen right now. So as you've seen in our scoreboard, the highest is 3 out of 10 points. The earlier presentation described how the prominent platform companies operating in the Philippines are choosing to either integrate or ignore the health and safety and other basic standards of fairness among their workers. The current situation is the outcome of a market largely left to itself. Our regulatory authorities are in the position to implement pro-worker reforms. On the part of organizations and consumers like us, what can we do? A way to help to improve the situation, to improve the system, is through the Fair Work Pledge. So it is open to all organizations willing to support the advocacy of fair work. This pledge leverages the power of organizations' procurement, investment, and partnership policies to support fairer platform work. Whether an organization uses platform services heavily or not, it can pledge to do more by paying attention to the working conditions and labor practices of gig workers, guided by Fair Works principles. So we have two levels. We have the Fair Work partners and we have Fair Work supporters around the globe. I'm glad to report that in the Philippines, Fairwork is supported by the affiliations of our researchers, namely De La Salle University through its Social Development Research Center, UP School of Labor and Industrial Relations, and Ateneo de Manila University. So another Fairwork supporter is the Far Eastern University. Kapatiran sa dalawang gulong or kagulong and the Polytechnic, University of the Philippines, Center for Labor and Industrial Relations Studies have also signed up. So if you would like us to write to your organizations, let us know and we'll gladly assist in obtaining the commitment and signing up for the Fair Work Pledge. So thank you and back to you, Chana.
Thank you very much, Marge. So I hope na may mga organizations present here today who will be interested to pledge their support for Fair Work. So before we end, we want to invite everyone again to access the 2023 report on the Fair Work website. You can visit this link or scan this QR code to access the report. And that concludes the Fairwork Philippines 2023 report launch. We are grateful for your presence and we hope that we can all continue to work for a fairer future of work for all. Again, maraming salamat sa lahat ng ating mga audience, both dito sa webinar natin at sa Facebook. So maraming salamat po and have a good evening to everyone. This has been your host, Chana Garcia, and we all wish you a great evening. Maraming salamat.